This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction. Now, last year I had the zchus to speak on behalf of Lev La'achim, so I'm very humbled and honored to be here again. And I asked, so Nu, how did I do last year? And everybody said it was amazing. We were blown away. What did you speak about again? So perfect. I'll just give the same drasha again this year. But there's a very big difference between last year and this year. Last year we lived in a world with Reb Chaim. It was an Eretz Yisroel with Reb Chaim. It was a Lev La'achim with Reb Chaim. But this year we live in a world without Reb Chaim. And it's an Eretz Yisroel. We see now what an Eretz Yisroel looks like without Reb Chaim. We see very quickly what Eretz Yisroel looks like without Reb Chaim. And now we're a Lev La'achim without Reb Chaim. But Chazal tell us, Gedolim tzadikim b'misasan yoisami b'chayim. And now Reb Chaim, Reb Aaron Leib, they're by the Kisei HaKavod, and they're mispalel for the continued siyata d'shmaya of the movement of the Gedolei Yisrael, and they continue to be mispalel for the return, as Rabbi Klugman said, of all of the Rebbeinu Shalom's kinderlach. B'shusel the Yichashiv Rabbonim and Askonim, or the Hanhala of Lev La'achim, Rabbi Klugman, Rabbi Carmel, Rabbi Yanki, and it's very fitting that today's meeting takes place in the home of Yedidi, Rabbi Yossi, who, when I started the shul is also, we're calling it an international Torah center. Rabbi Yossi gave me eitzos about how to set it up. I don't know if you remember, how to set it up, how to set up the whole matzav, and I'm very grateful to Rabbi Yossi for his friendship and for his support. And specifically, one particular quality that I admire very greatly. Many people are very into Gedolei Yisrael. But for most people, Gedolei Yisrael, most people are into Gedolei Yisrael as like a photo op. So you go to the Gadol's house, you snap a few pictures, you make sure you ask a question that's completely irrelevant to your life, you get the answer you want, or at least you craft the question in a way where you're going to get the answer you want, and you go home breathing a sigh of relief. You didn't ask anything that's going to change you. But Rabbi Yossi, over the years, I've spoken about many inyanim with him. And what the Gadol says is what Rabbi Yossi does. And he doesn't ask with any preconceived notions. And that's his recipe in life. And Bez Hashem, it's a recipe for great siyata d'shmaya. And we're mevarach Rabbi Yossi and mishpachtoi to continue to have bracha v'hatzlacha b'chol maseh yodav. There's an expression, money can't buy everything. It's completely not true. There's kamat nothing in this world that money cannot buy. Here's case in point. I was at my kids' yeshiva dinner, and my son's Rebbe came over to me. He said, Rabbi Glatstein, I have this question. Nobody was ever able to give me an answer. So already the juices are flowing because, with a challenge like that, bring it on. I want to hear what this question is. That nobody was ever able to give an answer. He said the question is very simple. Yisachar and Zevulun. Yisachar learns, Zevulun supports. So Yisachar splits his schar with Zevulun. Zevulun gives some money to Yisachar, and they call it a day. They cut it even. We know they split the schar. The question is that the Rebbeinu Shalom created man with an ailment, and that ailment is called the Yetzer Hara. Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. There's only one medication for the Yetzer Hara. You could say Pitam Aktaris from a klaf, it's not going to do anything to the Yetzer Hara. You could go to Karastir, it's not going to do anything to the Yetzer Hara. There's only one medicine for the Yetzer Hara. So Sisham writes, V'hinei Pashadhu, Shema Boire Loibara Lamakazu Ela Refuazu, Efsher B'Shom Panim, Leirape Mizois Hamaka, Bilti Zois Harafu. Torah is only refuah. So it's very nice, Zvulun gives money to Yisachar. And Zvulun gets some of the schar of the learning. But at the end of the day, Zvulun has a Yetzer Hara. Does Zvulun get the protection from the Yetzer Hara by supporting Yisachar? This was the question the Rebbe asked me. Like the Chavetz Chaim points out, Avram Avinu is the Baal Chesed. We don't find anywhere in the Torah that the Yetzer Hara came along and had a wrestling match and tried to knock out Avraham Avinu. Because Avram Avinu does Chesed, Yetzer Hara doesn't like Chesed, but he could tolerate it. So he'll swallow it. And Yitzchak Avinu is a symbol of Avodah, so he's davening all day. Avodah, Gevura, the Yetzer Hara doesn't like him, but he's soivel him. the Yetzer Hara doesn't come to knock out Yitzchak Avinu. But Yaakov Avinu is a symbol of Torah, and the Yetzer Hara comes and tries to kill Yaakov Avinu, and they're embroiled in a wrestling match, and the dust comes up, Ad Kisei HaKavod. Why is the Yetzer Hara trying to kill Yaakov? Because Yaakov is Torah, and Torah and the Yetzer Hara cannot coexist together. There ain't room for the two of them. So the Yetzer Hara has no choice but to try to kill Yaakov Avinu. So the question is, very nice, Zevulun pays Yisachar. How does he fight the Yetzer Hara? That's the question. So I told the Rebbe, I think I saw something on this. And umatzasi hasha'ava nafshi. Sure enough, I saw in the Chida, in Parshas Vayechi, in the Reish David, that the Chida says that Zvulun, lest he think that it's very nice, I pay Yisachar, but what's going to be with the Yetzer Hara? Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha, says the Chida. Let Zvulun be joyous that he could go out into the secular world, into an environment of Tumah, because he is protected from the Yetzer Hara. Why? The Yisachar ba'ayalecha. In fact, the Chida says Zvulun is better than Yisachar, because Yisachar is only protected be'idna da'asik be. Zvulun is protected the whole day. That's what the Chida writes. So I already won good brownie points with my son's Rebbe. The good thing is my next son had that Rebbe, so it worked out well. There's another Chida, because the Chida writes there are other benefits in this world you could actually buy with money. The Chida says, what are the two greatest mitzvahs in the Torah? Number one, Talmud Torah. Number two, Chida writes, Shal Sechuvas Yosef Oimetz, Siman Yotes, living in Eretz Yisrael, the Chida says. So what do you do if you live in Chutz La'aretz? Says Chida, not a problem. V'hakesef yanes hakol. You support people living in Eretz Yisrael. Says the Chida, support people learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael. So you kill two birds with one stone. V'hakesef, money will answer your problem. He lives in Flatbush. He doesn't open up a sefer, and he gets schar limud. You still have to learn though. You get schar Talmud Torah. You get protection from the Yetzer Hara, and you get the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. But the Chavetz Chaim has a kasha. Because what do you think happens in Olam Haba? You go there, you give them tickets. You give here, I have 7 tickets, give me Olam Haba. What's the schar of Olam Haba? The schar of Olam Haba is Yedias HaTorah. So if the guy worked his whole life and he doesn't know a blessed word of Shas, so how's he going to get schar in Olam Haba? Says the Chavetz Chaim, look in the Sfarim Hakdoshim, he means Sifrei Kabbalah, that if you pay and you support Torah, you don't just get schar, you will get Yedias HaTorah. You will be a Talmid Chacham Olam Haba. Says the Chavetz Chaim, u'be'emes davar poshet hu. Shaha'adam ha'machzik lo'im dei Torah, afal pi shahaya amal oretz, zoiche shala'asid yeda gam hu es HaTorah. Okay, very nice. But here's the problem. There's one more thing you're going to need money for. There's something more important than Hachzakas HaTorah. Here's the bottom line. This whole world, what's it all about? What are we doing here? We're here to prepare for Olam Haba. Haskein atzmacha b'proizdar kedei shetikanis l'traklin. There's a frightening Chovos Havavos. I don't know why this Chovos Havavos is not known. It's in Shar B'tachin, and it's Bechlal not known. It's virtually unknown. Chovos Havavos says, Gemul Olam Haba in Adam Ro'iloi b'ma'aseu hatoiv bovad. You can't get Olam Haba by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. You can't. You could use it up. You eat a good breakfast. Okay, very nice. You had a good morning seder, but you ate a good breakfast. So we'll call it a day. And then you did another mitzvah, so you got some covet. You can't go to Olam Haba because you're a good Jew. Says the Chovos Havavos, you could be a tzaddik gamor, you could wake up, you could be toivel in the mikvah, you could daven vasikin, you could learn 3 sedarim a day, you could keep kala, kechamura, you could even go to Kerastir every year on the yard side. You're not zoicha to Olam Haba unless you could be counted among Mishe Yoire B'nei Adam Avodas Haboire V'yan Higem La'asos Hatoiv K'moshe Kasav. u'matzdike harabim la'olam va'ed. You ain't getting the retirement package upstairs unless you could be mimatzdike harabim. And new, so what do? If you're not a mashpia and you're not a kir v'choikim activist and you're not on the front lines for Lev La'achim, v'zeh pashut v'hakesef yanes hakol. If it could buy Yediyas HaTorah, and it could buy Schar Torah, and it could buy protection from the Yetzer Hara, you could buy the most important commodity you're going to need la'olam va'ed, and that is Schar Zikoi Harabim. Yes, we live in a generation, people support Torah, but there's something more important they need to contribute to la'olam va'ed, and that's Schar Zikoi Harabim. We know the numbers of Lev La'achim, tens of thousands. That doesn't mean anything, The worst thing you could do, the worst pitch you can make for an organization are numbers. Because human beings, they can't process numbers. Rabbi Kiva came to the city of Ginzik, and he was speaking at a Parlor meeting. And he's trying to inspire the Olam. So the Medrash says in Parshas Noach, he told them an inspirational story. If you don't give money, you know what God did? He wiped out the whole world in the Mabul, and millions of people died, and everyone's sitting there, and they're on their phones. Nobody's interested in hearing a story about the Mabul. Millions of people. And then the Medrash says Rabbi Kiva told them the story about Eoiv, and they broke down crying, and they gave generously. So I want to tell you one story. I don't think the story was ever said Barabim. It's a story I heard when I was Menachem Avel, my Rosh Yeshiva, when he lost his mother. I'm not going to say my Rosh Yeshiva's name. It's public. I'm not hiding it. Yiras HaKavod. I can't bring myself to say the name. I could tell you after. My Rosh Yeshiva is a Rosh Yeshiva of one of the largest yeshivas in America. It's a network of yeshivas. They have dozens of yeshivas throughout the United States. My Rosh Yeshiva alone started a few yeshivas himself. He comes from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And when his mother passed away, he was sitting Shiva, and his brother, Rosh Yeshiva in his own right, said over the following story about a Rabbi, Dr. Lou Nolman, who was a principal in Scranton, worked for Torah Masar for many years, and then moved to Eretz Yisrael. This is a letter that my Rosh Yeshiva's mother, who had passed away, wrote to the family of Dr. Lou Nolman when Rabbi Dr. Lou passed away. This letter was written by Mildred, okay? The kosev of this letter was Mildred, the wife of Sam, the parents of our Rosh Yeshiva. The story begins on a warm, bright, sunny day in early July 1959 at Chapman's Lake. In the early afternoon, Mildred is writing to the children of Lou Nolman. Your dear father came up to visit, quote unquote, and as soon as I saw him, I realized what his mission was. And suddenly my day was not so bright. For at least a year, he had been working on me constantly to send my son David away to yeshiva. But I was determined to hold my own. I had all kinds of arguments with myself. My son was too young. Nobody in our community went away to yeshiva. Sam was much more open to the idea, and I was determined, and I mean very determined, not to change my mind. How well I remember that afternoon and the feeling of being drawn and won over gently, slowly, helplessly by your father's warm encouragement and soft but strong words. At that point, I began to feel I could no longer control the situation, and he left in the early evening, and I shuddered when he left me with the following parting words. Please know that if you don't send David to yeshiva, you will be guilty of robbing Klal Yisrael. Those words changed me, my family, and the Jewish people for history. We are terribly sorry and sad about your great loss. Please know, few people accomplished in their lifetimes what your father did in his. And my Rosh Yeshiva says over, imagine if his mother would not have taken that advice. He would have gone to a day school in Scranton. He would have been an honest balabas, a Shomer Shabbos. he would have gone up to Shamayim and they would have said, "Nu, where are your 3 yeshivas? Where are your dozens of moistas? Where are your thousands of talmidim?" If his mother had not made that fateful decision 72 years ago. I have a different take on the story. Rabbi Dr. Lou Noman. You think it was easy for him to harass Mildred and Sam every single week? Send David to yeshiva, send David to yeshiva, send David. After like 3 times, what if he would have said, okay, they don't want to send David to yeshiva. It's not my problem. I gave it my best. I gave it my best shot. And on to the next. What if Dr. Lou Noman would have given up and thrown in the towel? He would have gone up to Shamayim. And they would have said, "Lou, you're guilty of robbing Klal Yisroel. You could have been Matzil and Nefesh, who would have produced thousands of Talmidim, myself included. Why didn't you give it an extra shot? Why didn't you try one more time?" We speak about Lev La'achim registering tens of thousands of kids in yeshiva. Forget the numbers. How much does it cost for one kid? One kid. $500. $540. So you already made out your check for $1,000. Hopefully. But you could have added another $540. And you could have saved one more kid. And that kid could have been a Gadol B'Yisrael. What, you think a Gadol B'Yisrael could only come from Bnei Brak and have Haimisha parents and learn in a regular yeshiva? When Chazal say, Hizaru b'vnei ha'aniyim shemehem teitzei Torah, you think it means, the kid's parents don't have money, so he could be a Gadol. That's not what it means. Hizaru b'vnei ha'aniyim. Gedolim could come from a background where they don't know Torah and they don't know Kriya Shema. How many Gedolei Yisrael? You ever heard TorahAnytime.com? You should. I recommend that. Who started it? Shimon Kol Yaakov, dear friend of mine with his brother Ruvain. They're in public school. A Rabbi Deutscher was matzel them. And they saved these 2 kids, and they started something. Tarni at that time is responsible for millions of hours of Limud Torah. Who started it? The guy who went to yeshiva on Coney Island Avenue? On Ocean Parkway? These were public school kids. They made an impact on Klal Yisrael. That one kid that you save could change the face of Klal Yisrael forever. So if you're on the front lines of Lev La'achim, and you have the opportunity to be Mekayim Zikoi Harabim, which is greater than any mitzvah that you will ever do, great. If you're not on the front lines, you could go there by opening up your hearts and contributing to Lev La'achim and tapping into the zechus that will buy the most important commodity that we all need, a piece of Olam Haba. Thank you very much.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.